Welcome back. Thanks for being with us here on Morning Live. It is, of course, budget day here in South Africa. And with an economy that's struggling to recover and the added pressure of more jobs lost, one has to wonder how Finance Minister Tito Mboweni will best juggle the numbers in Parliament this afternoon. And to help us look at some of the key issues such as unemployment and resuscitating this economy, two areas that could be in stark contrast to each other, we're joined by Labour analyst Terry Bell and economic analyst Dilip Garach. Thanks so much, gentlemen, to both of you for joining us.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, thank you, and good morning.
So let me start with the unemployment figures as announced yesterday by Statistics South Africa. Do unemployment and resuscitating the economy have to be in stark contrast with one another, especially given what was announced yesterday, the unemployment rate now officially sitting at 32.5% and growing? Terry, you can have the first bite and then Dilip.
Well, I think we should always go on the extended definition, which is 42-point-something%, and that's still not realistic. I mean, I would say that we're probably over 50% unemployment now, and we do have another figure, and that's about those young people with matric. 1/3 of them are estimated to be unemployed. These are people who had hoped that matric would give them some sort of entree into a better life. It has not happened. We're in an incredibly dangerous situation, and it requires some radical proposals and a proper time scheme for implementation, etc., which I fear we're not going to get. I don't think anyone in the trade union movement thinks so either, because Tito Mboweni appears to be wedded, not himself, but the government as well, to the present system, and they're not going to budge from it. And in so doing, they're going to come across with more austerity and the same slogans about how the public sector wage bill is ballooned out of all sight, without looking at the nuance, at the fact that the public sector includes low-paid workers, includes workers such as the health workers, the nurses, the doctors, the firefighters, etc. These are public sector workers who are not highly paid. There are about 28,000 managers, one could argue top-heavy, paid more than 2 million rand a year. You've got a parliament that costs us an extraordinary amount of money. We have a bloated cabinet, for example. If they wanted to do something symbolic, perhaps cut the cabinet properly. We have the largest cabinet in the world with 63 members, ministers and deputy ministers. Cut the numbers, and also why not cut their rather extraordinary pay?
Dilip?
I certainly think that over the years, unemployment has grown in South Africa. And last year we had COVID. So that is an unprecedented event. Many businesses were forced to downsize or close down. And that has created problems. So the statistic of 32% will continue to grow because COVID is still with us, and that will continue for the year. We're obviously looking at some kind of drastic measures that should be taken ideally by the finance minister, but his hands are tied, unfortunately. It's a budget which is very difficult to balance. It's the most important thing to create employment. You need to grow this economy. And you need to grow it not at the meager rate of 1.5% that we've been doing for the past decade almost. We need to grow it at more than 3% to create employment. And now what does that mean? You know, we've been talking about growing this economy and growing this economy. You have to go back to the drawing board. You have to really redefine. There must be policy certainty in this country. There must be a well-defined monetary and fiscal policy. We need to ensure that, certainly from the point of view, we must be able to also strengthen institutions. For example, Treasury, the Reserve Bank, SARS, the judiciary. All of these things have to be. They have to be strong. Also, we need to tackle the problems head on in our country: crime and corruption. We need to send people to jail. It's time that we actually did that. Further, I think that to promote employment, you must promote small and medium enterprise. Unfortunately, that is another area. Although we have a small business ministry, not much is being done to try and promote small and medium enterprises. I think also you need to relax the labor laws in this country because more people need to get employed and not have very strict labor laws and allow unions to control things. I think also education programs. I think education forms the pivotal role to any successful society. Unfortunately, in our country, entrepreneurship is never promoted. We like to see entrepreneurship being taken to schools, like grade 3s, getting to know what is interest rates and inflation rates and all of that. And then creating entrepreneurs from a very young age, because entrepreneurship and small business will help to create employment. And that's the only way we'll sort the problems out of unemployment in our country.
But pretty much like the government, it seems as though everybody in our society is repeating the same refrains year after year, budget after budget, because when we talk about growing this economy, why haven't we been able to grow the economy? It's the point you made previously as well, Terry, that, we can't keep doing the same old things. So you spoke about something radically different. What would be radically different in trying to kickstart the economy?
Radically different would, in the first place, this particular government, wedded as it is to a particular fiscal and economic policy and philosophy, is never going to remedy this economy. What they're going to have to do is to radically change. We talk about radical economic transformation. I think we really do need real radical economic transformation. Because one thing, and Dilip is completely correct, we're not going to lose the growth in unemployment, because we haven't even dealt with the fact of automation and the so-called fourth industrial revolution, which it makes no difference. We've had growth in this country, and it's been jobless growth. And in many cases, it's been job loss growth, which is more of what we're going to have, unless we deal with that. Now, in the first place, we've got to get out of the hole that we're in. I'm not talking about completely changing things now. What we're dealing with at the moment is this desperate situation we're in. And COVID is not to blame. We were in this mess beforehand. COVID has merely exacerbated it. So how do we get out of it? Well, Hasina Mali, we have no money. That's nonsense. We have a situation where, for example, commodities have boomed. There's been huge profits made in commodities and dividends paid which have mainly gone abroad. Why don't we tax them in the meantime if we're short of money? And Dilip is totally correct. In the first place, we're going to have to deal with the corruption, and people need to be jailed. We need to move against what has been happening. But if we have to get out of this hole, and we need money to get out of this hole, to provide a decent basic income grant, for example, would be a start. And how we finance that, we can do it via tax. Dilip is actually a tax expert. The point is, if we go back in history, in 1990, the corporate tax in this country was 50%. Nobody ran away. They were still here. You can't pick up a mine and stick it in your back pocket and push off to the United States or whatever. You are stuck here with your investment. 50%. It's now 28%. We have a huge, as I've mentioned, highly paid managerial level and very low paid actual workers, the people who do the real work. We need to change that. We need some sort of radical move at this stage, perhaps using tax as a first step, while we discuss, and we should have a national indaba, a likhotla, to discuss how we go forward in a democratic way. We have to change this system, not just the economic policy, but the whole political arrangement, which in itself is inherently corrupt.
And just taking from where Terry leaves this, Dilip, how different would you say are the labour and the economic deliverables that the minister would have to come up with in order for us to see, if not radical, but at least some sort of departure from the status quo?
Well, I think the minister is going to find this very difficult because, as Terry pointed out, we certainly don't have the money. So if you really want to try and do a balancing act here, certainly you know that with COVID, we spent a lot of money, perhaps again, to corruption and so on. If we had the 5 billion, which was 500 billion, which was meant to have ignited this economy and created employment and did all of those good things, unfortunately, you saw that didn't really happen. So we would have thought that would have helped. But I think as far as the finance minister is concerned, his hands are very tied. He's going to find it very difficult to try and, there are different ways of trying to raise revenue. Obviously, his mantra is going to be raise revenue, cut spending, and reduce debt. But now, in this budget, that's going to be the actual theme. How does he actually achieve that? The point we're discussing now is to grow this economy and to create the employment. But if you look at some of the other ways of actually trying to create more revenue, perhaps, and then start to spend, we can increase the actual taxpayer base, but that's difficult. We can increase tax rates. We can sell some of our state-owned assets, the SOEs, and I think that that's important because that's certainly an area where perhaps taxpayers' money is being squandered in many of these SOEs. There are some 720 SOEs in this country. One needs to analyze those SOEs and establish the cost-benefit analysis. In other words, what does it cost us to run it? What are the benefits to society? And the ones that are not beneficial to society, perhaps consider selling those kind of state-owned enterprises and bringing in money into the kitty. So those are the kind of, only when you have money in the country, then you can start to do public works programs, spend more money in that area, perhaps start to employ people, reduce the interest rate so that the private sector can get involved. Perhaps also consider what Terry is suggesting. Many of the corporates have a lot of reserves. Create some kind of additional tax, some kind of undistributed profit tax that will force them to pay tax if they don't use it in the economy. So those are the kind of things I think that the minister is going to be grappling with today, but I'm not expecting great hopes from this particular budget. I think his hands are very tied. It'll be interesting to see how he finally balances the budget.
Hands tied, but I think Terry disagrees with you because Terry says we do have the money, we need to spend it wisely. But Terry, you can answer to that for yourself. But, Dilip, as you were talking about state-owned enterprises, Eskom, of course, is one that readily comes to mind. And the lights just came on. They were off earlier on. And we know that Eskom, in a sense, is holding this country to ransom. And load shedding is here to stay, at least for the foreseeable future. So how do we solve this energy crisis, which is very much, an integral part of resuscitating this economy so that this Eskom problem does not halt the progress that we want to make in really kickstarting our economy, Terry?
Well, certainly Eskom is a strategic entity. However, I actually believe that you need to privatize that particular entity. Perhaps that's the route that we should take. Unfortunately, we have been dithering. We've been the Minister of Public Enterprises. I am not sure why it's taken so long to really do an analysis and perhaps consider, at least if you don't, it is a strategy to the country as a whole, and therefore perhaps sell 49% of the interest within the entity, allow it to be run more so as a business, and then allow that to, in other words, to expand on its own as a private enterprise. It'll make a lot more sense. Government cannot be involved in business. Unfortunately, in our country, government does want to dabble with business. Government is meant to create an enabling environment for business to thrive. And unfortunately, they get involved in many of these businesses. And at the end of the day, taxpayers' money gets wasted in these enterprises because of fraud and corruption. We see it in the Zondo Commission. So, I really believe that Eskom needs to be privatized. Perhaps consider, if it's strategic, sell 49% of the interest, bring that money in, spend that money in public works programs, and in that way resuscitate the economy.
But Terry, this is an enterprise that was at some point in the early 2000s the employer of choice. It was an enterprise that actually won international awards, this Eskom that we are talking about. It was run by government. So government has proven in the past that it is capable of running Eskom efficiently. We have thrown billions of rands, good money, after this entity. So surely it can't be that easy to walk away from it at this point, but should we?
No, of course not, because it's far too important to allow an enterprise such as that, which is at the core. This is at the core of our entire, not just industry, but our entire lifestyle is based on electrical power. The point is, it's far too important. It's a social necessity. Now, privatization does not of itself mean more efficiency. What it does mean is more private profit to those who already are wealthy. This has happened time and time again. In our own country, we had Sasol, for example, which when it became profitable, and it was very profitable and well run, was then sold off. You've had cases around the world. You had British Gas, for example, a great and very efficient and very profitable enterprise, but then the profits were ploughed back into social welfare and into the assistance of people as a whole. And then that was sold off. This argument about privatization is a nonsense. The point is we are suffering as a result of this whole private economy idea. The fact that individuals are more efficient. There are people sitting in New York who've never seen what a mine is like, who draw enormous amounts of money in dividends from the slave labor that many of the miners still work under. So the point is, it's a nonsense. What we have to do is look at it and say, what do we need to do? Eskom, yes. Why is Eskom in the mess? Yes, there's been a lot of corruption that needs to be dealt with. But if all the municipalities in this country, totally dysfunctional, and that comes back to cadre deployment, paid what they owe Eskom, Eskom would be a good way out of the hole that it's in. Then we have to look at the responsibility for it. We can't get out of it. The mess made with Medupe and Kusile, the two great big coal-fired power stations. Why didn't we go in one of the sunniest countries on earth to solar power on a much larger scale, to wind power? I live in the Western Cape, and I can tell you we have plenty of wind. So the point is, we've also got tidal power if we wish to use that. There are all sorts of new technologies that could have been used, that should have been used. I agree with Dilip that we have to get rid of the corruption. But that doesn't necessarily mean governmental corruption is the only corruption. The private enterprise and the private sector itself is riddled with corruption. Part of the reason that we're in the mess we're in terms of our debt to GDP ratio of about 80% is the fact that we have a massive amount of money just passing out of this country illegally. This needs to be stopped by the South African Revenue Service, for example. But there are lots of areas we need to work at. But we do need, and I think Dilip is correct, a comprehensive, cohesive policy which actually has a timetable and says this is how we're going to implement it. We are wonderful. We've got some great policies.
Gentlemen, unfortunately, we are unfortunately out of time, but in 15 seconds, and I really mean 15 seconds, practically a yes-no answer. What's your view regarding the economic recovery plan, the reconstruction and recovery plan? Can it work? Dilip?
Unfortunately, I don't believe it's going to work in our country because the political agenda is much greater than trying to sort things out in this country.
Terry?
No.
Well, as simple as that. Short, sharp, to the point. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and really appreciate your sentiments and unpacking some of the issues that we will be grappling with in the country and, of course, awaiting President Minister Tito Mboweni's speech this afternoon. But thank you to both Labour analyst Terry Bell and economic analyst Dilip Garach for discussing the expectations that they have for the 2021 budget. And this is where we have to say goodbye to our SABC2 viewers. Thank you.